Hello, my name is Lukasz Pawlowski. I'm a program manager for Microsoft SQL Server Reporting Services. Today I'm going to give you an introduction to Microsoft SQL Server Reporting Services. I'm going to explain what reporting services is, the architecture. I'm going to then do a demo that shows you how to design a basic report and integrate that into a WinForms application. The topics for today's discussion are going to include an overview of reporting services, a discussion of designing a report. We're going to talk about using the web service APIs. We're also going to show you how to add reports to your application using both URL access and SOAP methods to save to Excel. So to begin, reporting services is an enterprise class reporting solution that's based on ASP.NET web services and allows you to integrate seamlessly your reporting needs into your applications. When we talk about reporting, what we're really talking about is a life cycle. The life cycle includes authoring, management, and delivery. We're going to drill in on these. The very first thing about reports is that they define the data that you retrieve from a database, some calculations that you perform on that data, such as sorts and filters, and then finally the layout of that information, including conditional formatting, tables, pivot charts, and whatnot. Reporting Services provides a language called report definition language, in which we actually define our reports. This is an open XML schema that allows you, the application developer, to generate reports and publish them up to the server. We provide a tool in reporting services called the Report Designer that sits inside Visual Studio.NET 2003 and allows you to use a WYSIWYG interface to design reports, and we'll be seeing that in a second. Once you have the RDL defined, we use a report server SOAP method to publish it up to the server. When you manage that report, you provide things like access to that report, so security. You define how that report is executed, and you define how it's scheduled, and many other things. The idea here is that once you've designed your report, you actually want to determine by an administrator who has access to this report, when they can view it, how they interact with it. So if you have large amounts of data, you want to create a snapshot that's created on a schedule. And then people view that snapshot rather than everyone re-executing the queries by executing that report live. The result is a very scalable, manageable, and easy to integrate a solution for your reporting needs. Once you have the management aspects of the report, the last aspect is how you actually get that report to users. And here, Reporting Services provides two models. We have a pull model and a push model. The pull model allows users to access the report server and request a report, both through URL access, so just using a normal URL, as well as using a SOAP method. Both these allow you to easily integrate your report server into existing portals, as well as into your Win32 or ASP-based applications using SOAP methods. The second is a push model, which is based on our subscription architecture. Here, the report server will execute a report and send that to a recipient. Currently, we support file share and email, but that's extensible, and we'll see that in a second. So as a result, you get a complete picture of how reports live in your organization, from when they're authored to managed to delivered. The next aspect of reporting services that you should know is about the architecture diagram. So reporting services itself is a stateless web service. It's called the report server. The web service sits inside IIS. It's an ASP.NET based application, and it communicates with a metadata store, which is a SQL Server 2000 SP3A database. We call this the catalog. The catalog stores all the information that is used to manage reports. It is not the source for data for reports. We'll talk about this in a second. The core piece inside report server that gives it its real power is the report processing component. So this is the component which allows you to do things such as sorting, filtering, aggregations, conditional formatting. To support this component, it has two extensibility pieces. One, which is a data piece, which allows you to go off to various data sources, such as SQL, analysis services using OLAP or MDX, DB2, Oracle, or any ADO.NET data extension. We provide a set of added value APIs in the data extension space that allow you to do more report-specific things, but the key message here is that if you've invested in an ADO.NET data extension, you can just plug it into your report server. In the report processing piece as well, there's a rendering piece. This allows us to take this RDL document that you've defined and output it to any number of formats, including Excel, PDF, HTML, and others. Again, this is extensible, though the bar for actually implementing these is pretty high due to the complex object model that is supported by the RDL. Finally, we have two more pieces of extensibility inside the report server. We have security. This is supported in the enterprise edition of reporting services. So if you have a web-based application that has its own custom security provider that's not Windows integrated security, we can support that through this extensibility. And the last is the delivery piece, which allows you to output or send reports to things such as file shares and email. And this is again extensible, so we have partners that are doing things such as fax and printer and so on. Now, to access the report server, there are three methods of doing so. One is a browser that a browser would use, which is to use a URL. The second, an application would use, which is SOAP. And the third, management tools, which is WMI. In this talk, we're going to talk about the URL and SOAP applications. So with this, we have the general context for what we're going to do next, which is we're actually going to develop a WinForms application that talks to a report server. It has several key pieces. Number one, we're going to create a list of items in the report server namespace using a method called listChildren. Second, we're going to use the IE web browser control to show a report, and here we're going to use URL access. The third is the report that we've selected in our list view, we're going to actually export to Excel. So we're going to use the render SOAP method in order to export that and, of course, save it to a file. So with that, I think we're ready for the demo. So here we are in Visual Studio. The first thing we're going to do is design a report. To do that, we're going to create a new project. We're going to use the Report Project Wizard. The very first thing that we do when we define a report is we choose a data source. Now, a report can have more than one data source, and it can have more than one query for each data source. But in this case, we're just going to use one data source against SQL Server, against the AdventureWorks database. I have a pre-made query, so I don't bore you with query design, but it's a pretty nice size query. It'll return us some interesting data. Once we have the data for the report, we actually have to choose how to lay it out. The wizard provides you two options, and if you go into the WYSIWYG designer, you can have very many more. We'll see that in a second. I'm going to choose tabular. The next aspect of your layout is actually choosing any kind of groupings that you want to do. So in this case, we're going to get data for countries, and we're going to have separate pages for each country. We're going to choose to put categories as groupings on each page. And then in the details of our table, we're going to have sales and budget. It should give us a pretty decent normal business report that people would create. Finally, because of the reporting services allows you to do calculations, we're going to include subtotals so that you can actually see how things look inside your subcategories. The last aspect is to go ahead and choose a style. You can extend this with XML definitions. We're going to choose the corporate style. The report server is this one, and we're going to actually deploy it into the root of the report server catalog. With that, I'm going to choose a new name. We're going to call it demo report, and we're going to go ahead and preview. So what the wizard is doing right now is it's going ahead and creating that XML definition, which is report definition language, for us. And then taking that, compiling that into a .NET assembly, taking that assembly, getting the data, and then rendering that assembly into a preview pane. And slowly but surely you see it working, that we have our report. So we have a couple of things we need to do here. The data isn't formatted correctly, so we can go ahead into the layout view. Here is our WYSIWYG designer. We can select things, and we're going to go and change the formatting of this of these cells. We're going to use currency formatting. These are standard .NET currency formatting strings. The report server uses as an expression language VB.NET. So you'll see that we have sum of fields, bank, sales, .value. So this is one of the fields that are coming back from our query, and we can do aggregations on it. We can get more complicated with these expressions in line. We can also include custom code in the form of functions in the actual RDL, as well as we can reference custom assemblies in your report. When you're designing a report, you have to choose how to lay the report out. You can either use simple things such as text boxes, or you can use one of the custom data regions that we have. So we have matrices, images, subreports, charts, and lists. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and add a chart to this report. As you can see, you get a lot of the same features that you've come to know and love about report designers right here. Nice WYSIWYG. We're going to take the chart, going to drag it on. And now that we have for our summary for our category, we're going to take a look at how the subcategories sales and budget look without having to go into the actual details of the table. So we're going to just drag these things along, and we're going to preview them. So now again, we're going off and recompiling the report and grabbing that data. That data will be presented in the report, and here we go. So we have our report, our table, and embedded in the table is a chart. Pretty quick, pretty easy, and we're ready to go. So now we need to deploy this to the server. So we're going to go ahead and click deploy. And so what we're doing now is we're taking that report definition language, XML, and we're using a SOAP method against the report server to actually publish it. As you can see, we just succeeded. So if I come up, I have in another window here the report, a direct view of the report server. This is the view before we actually published our demo report, but here it is. I can click it. The report server will go ahead and execute that report. I'll click out and go back to Visual Studio. So now the next thing, now that we have our report, we want to integrate it into our application. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new project in here. I'm going to use a C# Windows application. I'm going to call it Demo App. And that's going to allow me to integrate my report. So the very first thing that I did ahead of time was I went and I registered the Microsoft Web Browser control. This is just a COM control that ships with Windows and allows you to access URLs from your Windows applications. I'm going to take that, I'm going to drag it onto my surface here and do some of that, some preparation work to realize on that drawing I had on the whiteboard. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add my list view control. Right, here we go. I'm going to quickly change some of the properties on here. I'm going to make it actually display in a list. I'm going to grab a couple of text boxes, or sorry, a couple of buttons, and name them. It's going to be show report. As well as this will be our export to Excel. So now we have our basic outline of what our Windows application will look like. So the next challenge is to actually populate this list box with some items from the report server. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and add a web reference to the report server web service. Visual Studio provides a wizard for choosing it. As you can see, I already have it here. But if you click web service on the local machine, it will do a discovery request and find the web service. The web service will then return a definition of all the methods it supports in a format called WSDL. And then Visual Studio will offer to create a proxy class for you. I'm going to name mine report server. What the proxy class does is it allows you to develop against the web service as if it were just another class in your application. So you don't have to do any messy XML transformations or whatnot in SOAP. You just simply reference the proxy class. Now that I've added the reference, I need to come up into my code view and go ahead and add a reference to that class here. So here we go. We're adding the report server reference. Also, I know that I'm going to output to a file, so I need to add system.io in here. Great. So we're ready to go. The first thing we need to do for our form is we need to add a member variable that will allow us to reference the service. So we're going to use the reporting service class. We're going to call it service. And here it is. So this is the class that actually defines the report server. It'll allow us to call SOAP methods. In our constructor, we're going to tell this service class, because it is just a proxy, which service to talk to. So we're going to set the URL property, and we're going to set a URL to that to the endpoint. There we go. The second thing that we need to do when we're accessing a web service is we have to be cognizant of the fact that we're making a network request. In order to do that, we need to set the credentials with which we're going to do that request. So in this case, I'm going to use integrated security by using the default credentials at system.net.credentials cache and default credentials. So essentially, the person running the application is going to be the one accessing the service. Now you can create your own credentials object and pass in a username and password, but we don't really need to do that here. So now that we've finished this, we're just about ready. The next thing that I want to do is when the form loads, I'm going to actually populate that list box. In order to do so, I'm going to use the listChildren method. The listChildren method returns a set of catalog items as an array. So we're going to call the method service.listChildren, and we're going to return everything in the root of the catalog. You should note that the report server catalog, it has a hierarchical namespace, so you just reference it using a path. There we go. I'm going to skip any kind of try-catch, but you should put error handling into your application when you're doing it. And we're going to add the items that are coming back into that list. To do that, we're going to have a list view item, and we're going to create a new one, and we're going to pass in the name provided by the catalog item we returned. And then we're going to use our list view, this is the default name, .items, and we're going to go ahead and add that list view item that we just created. With that, we should be ready to save and test the first part of our application. So here's our form. If I Control F5 this to make it run without the debugger, hopefully there won't be any errors. The application should load now in a second, and we'll take a look at whether or not we got our list of items back. Ah, yes. I did make one mistake. I should have come in here and set the startup project for my application. Also set the properties of my solution so that we don't go ahead and redeploy all my reports. Now, if I hit Control F5, we hopefully will see our WinForms application. Here we go. And as you can see, we have all of our items that we saw before in our list view. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to show the report in the web browser. Let me close out of this and come back to my form design. I'm going to double click the Show Report button, and we're going to go and take a look at populating the web browser. In order to do this, I'm going to get the report from the currently selected item in the list. Selected items, and we're going to take the first selected item. I'm going to take the text, and we're going to create a URL to it. So HTTP report server. Now the report server is going to take a set of parameters on the URL access URL. The first is the path, and then the second is the actual name of the report. Now after the name of the report, you can append a set of directives, such as whether or not to show or hide a toolbar, parameter settings, and a whole set of additional options. I'm going to keep it simple for the current time. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up the navigation in the web browser control. First, I have to do some basic plumbing. Since the web control doesn't require all its values, I'm going to pass in a blank object, but AX web browser control.navigate is the method we're going to use. And in here we're going to pass in my URL to my report and a set of references to this optional method. One more. And we should be good to go. So I'm going to save this, and hopefully, if everything is correct, when I hit Control F5, we'll now be able to view the report in the browser. So here's my demo report. I'm going to click Show Report, and presto, we have our report being shown in our browser. This toolbar is controlled through URL access, so you can do pagination, you can do zooming and finding. You can also export to other formats, all through the browser. You can also control parameters. So all those things are things you could put on the URL access URL. So here's our report. The last thing we're going to do is we're going to export the file to Excel. In order to do that, we're going to come back into Visual Studio. I'm going to double-click this button. And so we're going to use the render method. So to do this, we have to, again, get our report name. I'm going to copy it from above. We're going to need to build a path to that report. So in this case, it's in the root of the catalog. It can be more complex. The final thing we need to build here just is the file name. So we're almost done. We're going to, from the render call, we're going to get a set of bytes back. So we need to create a bytes array. We also have to pass in a format. We're going to use Excel. And we're almost ready to do our call. So we're going to say bytes will equal the service.render. As you can see, the render method has a whole set of parameters, most of which I have yet to define, but we'll do that as we go here. So first thing we're going to pass in is we're going to pass in the path, then we're going to pass in the format, and then I'm going to create a set of placeholders that I'll fill in a second. So the render method actually returns a host of parameters to you, which your application can use in order to drive further things, including a set of warnings and errors. The stream IDs that we don't have to worry about are used in order to get images coming back from the server. Continue with a little bit of plumbing work here. So the history IDs are strings. Device info is a string. Parameters is a collection of parameters. Credentials is a set of data source credentials. Show hide is a string. Encoding is a string. MIME type, also a string. So for a lot of these parameters, we don't actually have to pass in any data. You can. They'll provide you a lot more flexibility, but we don't really have to worry about it for the moment. So with that, I hope we're ready to go. The last thing we want to do is, once we have the set of bytes back, we want to create a file stream. And we want to write it to a file. And the file name, this is just basic .NET coding here. We're pass 0, and we're just going to say bytes.length. And then we're going to close the stream. So with that, hopefully everything is ready to go. We can save our work. Hit Control F5 again. We're going to choose our demo report, choose Export to Excel, and hopefully if we go out to the file system now, we'll actually see a Excel report in our working folder. And check this out. Here we go. Here's our Excel report. We're going to open it with Microsoft Office Excel. This is an Excel that supports Office XP and 2003 format. And here is our report in Excel. And with that, we're done with the demo. So as you saw in the demo, we have reporting services, which is an enterprise class reporting solution that is able to be integrated into your applications today pretty painlessly. You know how to design reports using the Visual Studio Report Designer that provides you WYSIWYG functionality, and then integrate those reports using both URL access as well as SOAP methods into your applications.